Welcome, everyone, to the pilot episode of Making It North. We are coming to you from northern Maine, specifically Presque Isle today, and my guest is Chris Morton, an extraordinary drummer, a hilarious writer, and the owner-operator of our local music store, as well as just a familiar, friendly face around the county. Um, Poor Chris, he probably can't walk through Walmart with being stopped a dozen times for people talking to him because everybody knows Chris. But anyway, before we get into Chris's life too much here, um, I just want to tell you what Making It North is. It's a web series that we're creating that is all about creative things. I wrote a little intro here. I'm going to read it. Making It North is a web discussion series featuring artists and makers in northern Maine, what they make, how they make it, and why, along with a sampling of their creations. And I put the word makers in there because artist sounds so, highfalutin and so snobbish, and I think of myself sometimes as an artist, and I don't want people to think I'm snobbish. Because I just think it ought to be more open than that, more democratic than that, because I think there's a lot of things that people make that some people might not call art, but they are anyway. But anyway, um, oh, and I think since I'm also a dad, I think I'm obligated to take just a moment to make sure that my kids cringe. So I'm going to introduce you to Make It North again, but I'm going to do it in a different way. Okay, you ready, guys? Here we go. Welcome to Making It North, y'all. Coming to you from the north, y'all. Yeah, that's the reason dads don't do that sort of thing on purpose, or at least not to be cool. We do it because we like to make our kids cringe, and it's one of the joys of being a middle-aged man. Okay. Anyway, so Chris, thank you for being my first guest.
I'm honored to be asked. Thank you for this. This is kind of
Yeah,
great.
yeah, and it's really good to get to see your face.
You
Just so
too.
happens we're doing this in the middle of COVID-19, so I hadn't got to see your face actually moving um, in weeks and weeks and weeks. So it's
Way
really,
too long. Yeah.
yeah, it's really cool to see you. Now, before we get into the creative stuff, I do want to ask you a little bit about the store and how you guys have adapted and are coping with COVID-19 and the way it's been stipulated that certain businesses can't be open or can only be open in a limited capacity. So tell us what's going on there. Just first of all, to give people an opportunity to know that there is still a way to buy their musical instruments.
Yes, absolutely. In the face of a lot of online suppliers not being able to fill orders and get them out and worrying, about the conditions in the warehouse, maybe people who are infected with COVID-19 might be sending freight to you. You never know. We decided to open the store back up, but only for curbside delivery. We can't let people in the physical confines of the store, and we'd rather not anyway. We don't want any kind of cross contamination, just in case we had a customer who had come in contact with somebody who had symptoms, something like that. So what we're doing instead, we're all quarantining. Those of us who work at the store, there are only two of us. So we are individually quarantining. We only go to work and then go home. We don't really wander around the community at large, licking strange doorknobs and windows. And we are doing
Let me ask you
curbside
a question.
delivery.
When you say you're quarantined, does that mean you guys are also not? Is it you and your family's quarantined? Are you alone, dude?
No, actually, I still take my kids on the weekends. That's the arrangement that I have personally, and I keep my kids quarantined. When I get them, we just stay home. We hang out. We don't go to the Family Dollar General and wander around or anything like that. We stay straight home so that we don't
Okay.
risk contaminating anybody else. And so we're doing curbside delivery right now at the store, which is where people will call in or they'll message us on our Facebook page or our email address or something like that. They'll message us their orders or they'll call them in, pay for them, and then they say, "I'm driving a white Buick and I will be there at 3 o'clock." And then we run out and hand them their guitar. So far, it's been pretty good.
All right, that's good to hear. Because we need a music store up here. I think besides you guys, is the nearest one Bangor, or is there something closer?
There's actually one in Holton. There's a small one in Holton that I believe is doing the same thing.
Okay. Yeah, I know we used to have one up in Van Buren, but I think they closed down here a couple years ago or
Yeah.
something. Yeah, so we've got to have a music store up here. I mean, I don't know about you, but a part of what keeps me sane during all this, and probably before this and after this, is playing music. You know, and it's a lot more fun to be able to play music with others. But it's definitely, even if I didn't have it at all, even if I have to play in seclusion, I think I would be going bonkers. It's the creative projects. That's a part of my coping strategy, frankly. So we need you guys. Definitely need you.
Thank you.
By the way, I want to throw one more thing out there, and then we're going to dive into the creative stuff. As I said, this is the pilot episode, and we don't have a real title sequence. Uh, that particular branch of creativity is not something I'm really good at, but I do have some ideas, and I'm kind of throwing this out there for anyone who views it and they are handy with computer graphics and putting together, video shows and things like that. I would love to have your input. Otherwise, I'll keep working on this and trying to cobble it together. But I'm going to use a feature of the software and share my screen. There for a minute, Chris, you're going to see what I see on the screen here, and I'm going to share with you guys a little jingle that I put together, and also what will be like the final shot before we would pan or go to, I don't know the proper video language, to the guest and to me. So I'm going to present my screen right now, and I'm going to show you what I've guys got. I'm doing this because I want people, if you have great ideas and you have some expertise in this, we welcome your help. So this, first I'm going to show you the picture. This would be the final image that would pop up. Right now you see it's in a Microsoft PowerPoint, which I am finding is not handy for making a smooth video with a audio over it. Anyway, that's the kind of slide I'm seeing. And then this is the little clip. Let me take it back to the beginning here. I was testing out to make sure that this would be something you guys would hear too. And this is the little ditty. Yeehaw! Yeah. Okay. Anyway, that's the idea. So if you're a genius with tech and with putting together videos, we need an opening title sequence that somehow captures that idea. Okay. All right. We're back to our regularly scheduled program right now. So anyway, all right. So Chris, we've talked about the business, which is important because it fuels so many others' creativity, and I have a feeling that's probably one reason that happens to be the line of work you're into, because you also have few creative bones in your body. By the way, I think everybody has some, they just don't realize it. But anyway, so let's talk about the creative side of you, and let's tell us about some of the stuff you're working on right now.
Sure. I lost you for a second. Say that again.
Yeah, I know. Here now.
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, computers are weird, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you see me freeze or something, just keep talking and assume I'm still there, because I might be. Yeah, a second ago you froze as well, and I was like, I hope he's actually there. And I'm talking, and you have this one. It was a great smile, but it wasn't moving. And I was like, wow, he's a happy guy. And it's stuck. But anyway, yeah, just keep talking. It does that sometimes. It's software. Like right now, you're kind of freezing. It's just software and computers and living right now in this weird situation we're in. But yeah, so tell us what you're working on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. My new favorite pet project is actually a blog site, and I am approximately 18 years behind the curve on that, I think. I have always wanted to do a blog, and I've always gone, someday when I am super bored, I am going to do a blog. And it took until about 3 months ago to actually get around to doing that. But it's fun. I love to write.
Oh,
I've
man.
always done personal essays, but there's only so much you can do with personal essays, and it's fun to be able to take what you're writing and get it in front of an audience right off, instead of trying to just post it on Facebook to a limited amount of people, or to wait and put it all into a book 2 years later when the moment has passed. Blog sites are great too because you can put in pictures and things. So
okay. So you mentioned essays. Is it all essays? What do you put on there? What kind of stuff do you write on there?
Yeah, it's mostly essays, random thoughts about things. A lot of times I'll start with a story about something that happened and then kind of link it into something
So we would
bigger
think
that's
of this
going
as
on.
a
My
kind
phone
of a
lately,
personal reflection style essays.
yeah, very much. Yeah. And it's nice because since I can put pictures in to go with it, a lot of times I can include pictures from something that just happened and then kind of give my thoughts about it, or a more complete scenario, something that happened around it, maybe even loop in other people's perspectives and give more of a complete story than I could with just words, basically. The pictures
Yeah.
are definite.
Now let me ask you a question. How would you compare what you write on your blog to what you have published in your books?
The blog is definitely
Oh goodness.
looser, and don't want to say irreverent, more irrelevant, I guess. It's since it's more casual, I'm more likely to go for the stupid jokes, but because there's less risk involved. Because I figure a book you might regret in 20 years, a blog post nobody's going to remember in 20 years probably. So you can take more chances. You can kind of go for lengthier jokes. It's it's a lot more free and fun, I'd say, than putting down the written word in an actual physical book.
Now I got to say that's saying a lot, because I think of your books as that same style of writing where you're talking about, it's inspired by real stuff, and you definitely, there's a lot of humor and jokes in there. So to say you do that more in the blog, I mean, that's saying something. I have personally called you, our Louis Grizzard, our Patrick McManus, our Dave Barry of Northern Maine, because it's really that local out in the country rural humor, like living life. I don't know. It's a great fun. And your books tend to be collections of short stories with some essay content to them, as well. And so you've published two so far, right?
I have actually, and I have them here because someone warned me I should maybe have them here.
Yes, this is right. Yeah,
Right?
you kids quit pooping on the lawn was the first, and then it might get weird was the second one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Um, there was a situation where someone close to us was they were fighting for their life in the hospital, um, and I was sitting with the family, and I believe we were either down in Portland or Boston, and we were there all day. They had to go through a surgery, and it was a pretty scary time. And I was there with the family in the waiting room all day long. And one of the things that got us through that time of fear and worry and grief, um, with one of your books. We had You Kids Quit Pooping on the Lawn in the waiting room, and we would read the stories out loud to each other, and we would forget all about what was going on there in the hospital that we were waiting to hear, and we would just laugh, and it really it got us through a hard time. So
That's
yeah,
fantastic. Thank you for that.
yeah, absolutely. So I highly recommend um, those books and the blog post. Um, okay, now I have this little cheat sheet that I sent out to you of things we might talk about, and I don't think
Yeah.
we'll get to all of them. I mean, we're 15 minutes, 16 minutes into this, and we're probably not going to get to everything on that sheet. We don't have to. We're just having a conversation. But I would like to ask you about where you get your ideas for what you write, um, where they come from, how you decide that, well, that's something I've got to write about. How do you come to that? And tell us about that process.
I think the ideas you just encounter in the course of the day. Something will happen and it's just very compelling and you can't let go of it. And then you
Mhm.
start to look at it from a particular sector. Maybe you tie it into something bigger, especially if it's something that seems to tie into an overlying theme or bigger kind of vein. Um, that's where a lot of it starts. The other half of that, though, it's not just the idea itself; it's having time to dwell on it. And it seems like every time I mow my lawn, right after that, I go, "Oh, I've got to go right," because when you're forced to actually just sit there, especially if it's a long drive or something like that, and you
Yes.
can kind of that active sort of part of your brain and turn it intrinsically. That's huge for me. I really wish that I could put my laptop on my lawnmower. I know I would for sure mow over a couple trees and probably like part of my garage, but I would write so much more.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. It's the same thing for me. Like I work 30 minutes away from the house here, and I have toyed with the idea of getting faculty housing there, and my name is on the wait list, not because I want to live, in two towns away, but because sometimes weather, snow, if that's happening, I'm not going to drive home. I just could walk across from the campus there, and sleep there, and maybe be sure to make
Yeah.
it into work the next day. But I mentioned that to one of my coworkers. Yeah, I said, yeah, I'm looking at trying to get a place. He said, oh, but you wouldn't lose that drive. A lot of people would say, sign me up because I want to lose the drive. But that drive over, man, holy cow. I mean, I don't know how many ideas hit me and start taking real shape and develop in that downtime, right? I don't think I ever turn the radio on anymore. I just don't.
Yep.
Because turn the radio on and that's someone else taking the steering wheel of my brain. And I like what my brain does whenever, maybe no one else does, but I like what my brain does whenever it doesn't have anything to do.
Whenever you close the other avenues and let it just kind of find its own path,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I totally get that.
yeah, yeah. Like I can't go to see my mom, 4 hours away downstate. Every time I go, I've got a new song by the time I get there. Every time, right?
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I love that kind of time. So do you have some selections or something you might like to share with us?
I do actually, if you don't mind, that'd be kind of great.
Oh, I don't. I'd love to. Yeah, absolutely.
This first one is something I put on the blog site. It's a small excerpt of a longer story that I had written. I was trying to give an accurate description of these senior citizens used to come to my dad's church. They'd hang out in the basement and have coffee time together.
Mm,
And it's kind of great. It's one of those small little snippets of life where, on the one hand, if you're in it over and over and over, it's really boring and you take it for granted. But on the other, 15 years later, when all those people are gone, you look back at it and kind of wish you had documented it. So
mm.
I did that. There are these three particular characters actually that I wrote about, and this is a typical coffee break for my dad's church, complete with the characters. Alan was stone deaf, which made conversations bizarre. Mr. Breckenridge was oblivious, which made conversations impossible. And Francine was just Francine. If you were weeding your garden, Francine was the sort of person who would wander over to stand in the middle of your carrots and point out the weeds you had missed and tell you stories about people she had known 40 years ago who had also weeded their gardens but were better at it than you are. She would then tell you unseemly and sordid stories associated with those people. Later, after the garden was completely free of weeds and you had locked yourself in your house and turned off all the lights and hid in the basement to get away from her, she would finally wander away to call her relatives and regale them with stories of all the weeds you had missed, probably because you were on drugs and or a communist. It was an interesting cast of characters. Coffee break conversations usually went something like this. Alan, smiling and nodding amicably for a minute before finally wheezing, I heard it's supposed to snow tomorrow. Francine, nodding smugly. Yeah, snow tomorrow. They said that. Mr. Breckenridge sits with his chin touching his chest, possibly deep in meditation, or fast asleep, or maybe dead. Alan smiles and nods for a full 45 seconds. They said up to 4 inches. Francine, nodding and leering. 2 to 4. 2 to 4, they said. Mr. Breckenridge remains silent, or comatose, or gone. Alan, staring at Francine in confusion. 2 to 4? What? Francine, grinning madly. 2 to 4! 2 to 4, they said. Alan, thoroughly confused. Oh, 2 to 4 what? Francine nods happily. Mr. Breckenridge snorts, then raises his head without opening his eyes. I saw a bird in a bush yesterday, he says solemnly, hauntingly, ponderously. Then he chuckles heartily. Francine nods, still grinning maniacally. Alan smiles and then leads forward. It's going to snow tomorrow. End scene.
Perfect. Great example. I love that selection because really highlights. I think your sense of humor, the kind of writing you do. Um, these real but comical characters, and you can really, I mean, you can hear them coming alive. The description of them, and I think you really have a great strength for dialogue too. I mean, just
Thank you.
yeah. I mean, there's that classic thing that whenever I was being taught the right way to do it in school, the dialogue is all about, if you think the dialogue is logical, that people say the next logical thing, that is not the way conversations work at all. People don't say the next logical
Oh
thing.
yeah.
They say the thing they were planning on saying before you ever spoke.
It's so true.
So yeah, it's this ping ponging back and forth of things that aren't being said, of these agendas. Yeah. So and it captures it. It's like each character is definitely responding, and I think I can say I know people like that, right? And yeah, great fun, great fun. Okay, so you've got an idea. You just threw them on your yard. You're rushing for your laptop to write it down. How does it go from gotta write it down idea in my head to a thing that's in your hand?
If I'm lucky, then I've got the time and the mental headspace, I guess. Yeah, the headspace where I can sit down and just kind of put it down in one go. I love it when I can start writing at 8:30 at night. I'll sit on the couch and just stare at my laptop and just start writing. And all of a sudden, it's 9 pages later, and I've got the whole story stem to stern. And I'll need to go back and edit it a little
Wow.
bit, but usually that's if I'm lucky, that's what happens. If I'm not, then I'm starting to write it, and then one of my awesome, wonderful, fantastic children suddenly tries to cut off their own finger or something like that, or there will be something that comes up where all of a sudden you're kind of derailed. And if that's the case, I try to get well, if they've cut off a finger, we take care of the finger first. But if it's a
Yeah,
non-urgent sort of
that
situation,
sounded like it was
then I
going to
try
be an interesting sentence. I try to get 4 pages before I go try to stop the bleeding.
to like hang on, literally to the finger. So if I have the time, then I just try to get the pertinent details down, just so, say, like 2 months later, if I'm trying to write, I can click on the Word document that's very sparsely kind of written with a little snippets that I want to go back in and fill in around. So sometimes I'll have Microsoft Word documents that make no sense whatsoever because it's little clips of jargon or plot points that I think would be funny or things that happen or different observations. And then other times it's boom, it's 12 pages of stem to stern completeness if I'm lucky.
Mm. And you rattled off the number 9 pages potentially, which that's an amazing chunk of writing to do in one sitting. From my perspective, I'm sure for others they say, "Oh yeah, I write 20 pages, in a sitting." And it's not that I probably wouldn't enjoy the ability to do that. I just don't have the ability to do that. I don't know if it's my attention span or my life's just too hectic, or I don't know. I can't bring myself to sit there that long. I think I'm probably got a little OCD, maybe. I don't know, but I yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I found that to be interesting. That now I found that I do like that initial phase of creativity. When you've got the idea and it's coming out, you know,
Yeah.
whether it's a written idea or it's something I'm building with my hands or whatever. But that initial stage of making it real and it's fresh. There's like an energy and an excitement to it. So I like that. So I like doing a lot of shorter projects that don't take a long time to do. But that energy, I can sustain that initial energy and that positivity for a while. I mean, really until the first phase of it is done, before the revisions really starts, and you go back and you tweak it. So it'll stay with me for a while usually. And sometimes it won't stop, even if it's a project that takes me like weeks and weeks to finish. Um, but for that reason, usually it is shorter projects that I really like that. I like that phase of, well, I got a new idea and I want to put it on paper or create it however. Um,
Yeah.
there's something exciting about a new idea being born, you know, for me. And so you said that later on, like a month or two later, that was the other thing I found interesting. A month or two later, you remember something, you think of something you want to add. Is there some significance to that amount of time that you mentioned, 1 to 2 months?
Yeah, it's funny because your perspective can change even just a week after an initial event has happened. But a lot of times, different scenarios or just the natural progression of the story that you're watching unfold, you'll be able to see it in hindsight as you weren't in the moment. I love to come back to something a couple weeks or a couple months even after it's happened, just to be able to fill in more. And that's where the battle is, I think, between you're trying to remember everything that happened a couple months ago to give accurate details, but you're also able to offer the wisdom of hindsight.
Mm.
That's tricky sometimes to balance those two.
So I always got the impression, and maybe I was totally off base, and please correct me if I was, but I always got the impression from reading your stuff that you took some creative liberties and that absolute accuracy wasn't something you cared. Not that you were lying or anything. It's just that you would take a little, creative license to make it funny and compact it and make it have the rhythm it ought to. And there was such a natural sense of humorous pacing that, man, if your life really is that naturally funny, I was like, holy cow, I really need to go hang out in Masardis a little bit more and meet more of that bunch of people.
That's why I love the blog though. There are so many times things have happened and I've had the presence of mind to grab the picture. Once upon a time, my brothers and I, we took a kayak down a mountain in the middle. There was snow on the mountain. There was a really
Mm.
steep snowmobile trail down a mountain. So we took a kayak. And it's the
Of
sort of
course,
thing that when you
of
tell
course,
your,
as you
yeah,
do.
why would you not? And when you tell your kids about that later, they're like, sure, dad, yeah, whatever. It probably didn't happen that way. But we just happened to have a picture of it. Someone had the presence of mind to bring a disposable camera because that was like the early 2000s. And we happened to snap a picture of it. And I know some of the stories that I wind up telling seem pretty far out there, but man, so is life. So many things that have happened. It's hard to believe. And I love being able to go, no, it's for real. Here's a picture.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That
yeah,
having been said, I love the Emily Dickinson quote, "Tell the truth, but tell it slant."
yeah,
I am guilty of telling the truth all kinds of slant and kind of emphasize this and maybe downplay that a little bit and tweak
yeah,
that
yeah,
a little bit.
yeah.
That's half the fun, is arranging the frame around the picture.
Um, in addition to that lag time of 1 to 2 months before you go back and work on the project, um, to the benefit of hindsight and getting things right and remembering things, is there any benefit to being able to more objectively see your work and make necessary changes by waiting that long?
Yeah, you're in love with it because it's your new creation
Mhm.
and you have blinders as to the imperfections. You think everything is great, but then you're not so sentimentally attached to it when you come back to it 2 months later because you have a new project that's even better. So when you look at it, you've lost those blinders and you're going, oh man, this is actually kind of horrible and I should put more space there, and this is really long and rambly, let's just take that out or condense there. It's nice to go back and feel more impartial about it and to trim for quality instead of being absolutely in love with every aspect of what you just wrote.
Mhm, mhm. I think if we were still college students, our instructors would call what you do creative nonfiction. Um,
Yes,
did you actually take Dr. Hodgkin's creative nonfiction class?
yes, it was huge to me, actually, very formative. I loved that class. She's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I didn't wind up taking her class when I went there, and she always lets me know about it when we bring up the subject. You never took my class, um, but I didn't really understand what creative nonfiction was. I mean, I didn't really understand what most things were as far as literature goes back then. I just knew I liked to write, and I'd been told sometimes I say something that has a pretty cool way of coming across. So I said, oh, I love being creative, so let's do that too. Um, but I should have, because I find that I wish I knew more about that, because I find myself wanting to write that a lot, dabbling with that. So yeah, and I think another reason I want to bring that up is because the raw material that you have that you're putting on paper that in fact is from stuff that really happened. It's not some deep esoteric, literary thing, right? It's not like it's something that only select people have access to that's winding up on paper. No, it's just life.
Yeah.
Um, but some people think, I don't have anything to write, right? I don't have anything to make into art or make into something creative or whatever. I have nothing to draw from. And when they say that, I'm thinking, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
'Cause you're alive, and I've heard you talk. You told me these crazy stories about what your wife did to you last week. You know what I mean? What do you mean you got nothing to write about, right? So I don't know. I think there's been a lot of there's been a whole lot of, like I mentioned earlier, elitist notions built into what constitute art and making. And and because of that, there are people
Yeah.
all over the place. I run into all the time. I'm not creative. I'm not creative, and I'm thinking, what do you mean by that? I don't even understand what you mean by that. You know, because I know there are things that I do around here that they're not art. When it comes to like organizing my closet, there's nothing artistic about my closet. Not at all. But I understand that what I'm doing when I'm organizing that closet and how and positioning things in ways that work and ways that are easy to navigate and they're appealing to look at in the room or whatever. Those are the same skills I use when I'm putting things on paper. I mean, I
Yeah.
might not have that burning creative idea, but I might. I mean, I've had ideas that would what I wrote wouldn't be considered literature, it wouldn't be considered music or poetry, but I was just as excited about it, and making that made me just as happy. You know, I don't know.
Right.
So
Yeah.
anyway, I said all to say this: Chris is an artist. Chris is a writer. Chris writes literature, and yet the material comes from day to day stuff. Yeah.
From the mundane. This is true.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, we've been talking a great deal about your writing, but that isn't the only way your creativity expresses itself. You have a very interesting hat on. Tell us about your hat and your other creative side, the other things you do.
This is my interpretive dance troupe, the Star City.
Sometimes it looks that way.
So obviously you know that we both kind of wound up fortuitously, I guess, by the movement of a bigger hand, I think, a divine hand, I'm going to say even, in this fantastic, weird, awesome, hard to define band called the Star City Syndicate. It started out originally as a couple of us had talked about how much fun it would be to play the old Motown songs, just songs that had a horn section. And one of my favorite parts of the band is how you joined, in that you didn't know very many of the other members of the band. And
Mhm.
just the night before our first rehearsal, we happened to be working on one of your projects, actually, which was great. We were at the store rehearsing, and you happened to see the music that I had out for the next night. And I told you about it and went, hey, I have no idea how this is going to be. It might be a flaming disaster. Do you want to just show up to the first rehearsal and see how it goes? And you took a great big chance. And you were like, yeah, okay, I have nothing better going on. And you're fantastic. Like, you're the best singer we could have asked for, which is great. It's hilarious because nobody had this band planned and how it came together. But basically, 18 musicians, I think we're up to. I don't know, 17,
Mhm.
18. All these musicians kind of came together, and we started out, we were going to be a Motown band, but then we'd learn like a No Doubt song, and then we'd learn a Sinatra song or something like that. I don't
Chicago.
know what. Yeah, Chicago. Yeah, and it's really taken on a life of its own. It's hard to define, I think, who we are or what we are as a band, other than I'd say we're a good time.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
We have a lot of fun. Luckily, people seem to have a lot of fun in the audience when we're having a lot of fun. So it kind of works out. I feel so happy to be a part of it. I can't believe how it's
I know.
happened, but I love that I get to see you all the time in the band, that so many friendships are able to sustain because we're able to see each other at rehearsal every 2 weeks or on stage. What a feeling to play in the middle of the band. I absolutely love it. I'm so happy that we get to be part of it and that people put up with us too and come to the shows.
One of these days, it's coming because more and more people are hearing about us and talking about it outside the county. One of these days, we will play outside the county. Not that we are not busy as it is. Whenever COVID-19 is not bugging us, but normally we are plenty busy. But yeah, I tell you what, I was scared to death. I really
Really?
was. I was scared to death. Uh, I, you know why I told you before we actually started recording this, how something about calling this a production that people are going to watch. You know, I had to, psych myself out because my brain was starting to try to play funny tricks on me. Even though I'm on this doing this all the time with students. Suddenly, because it's going to be a show, uh, I was feeling like that old inhibition trying to come back. Well, that was a venue. The band was a venue. Um, I had been in bands before. That's the thing. I've been in bands and with like quartets and things in church music, but I had never done anything really like that. Plus, I didn't really know most of the songs because of my background. I grew up not knowing those tunes and not daring to listen to them for fear of being disowned. So it's all like all these really great old songs that I've been hearing like everywhere. I'd hear them in department stores. I hear them on someone else's radio and commercials. I've been hearing them, so they're like the soundtrack of my life. Yet I didn't know the songs, right? So all of that just freaked me out, and I felt like for the first year and a half, 2 years, it was like I didn't know what to do with my hands. I'm in front of people and I'm like knowing how that. I'm just now really starting to feel at home, and I love it. I love it. You're right. It's been probably the thing that has brought some of the most joy in my life. I think in the last 3 or 4 years. How long have we been going now, man? 4 years.
I think we're coming up. I think 4 years.
Yeah.
I think we passed our fourth anniversary a couple weeks ago, and I didn't even know. It was in March, actually. Our first rehearsal was March 2016.
And I
I
think
want to say so. When you started out, like you were good back then, but right now you're fantastic. You're a tour de force. You're fun to watch. Fun to be
yeah,
on stage with.
yeah, and that's and our fans have said the same thing. They've said you guys are starting to have more fun on the stage, and yeah, we've got some fans that follow us everywhere. Hi, Jan.
Hi, Jan.
We all love Jan.
Yeah, we do.
So now you talked about the band, and in a lot of ways, that is one of your creative babies. It all culminates around that store, and though you generally try to shirk off responsibility for this coming together, we generally, as a consensus, the rest of the band says, well, this is really, Chris's brainchild here, and we're very glad that you were there and put it together. But tell us about the music itself. What your contribution, what you get out of playing the drums, how creativity is at work in that process, because that's a very different animal than writing a piece of creative nonfiction.
Um, for me, a lot of my place in the band is actually formed with the other half of the rhythm section. I say the rhythm section, I say half. Honestly, Doug is in there too. So the rhythm section kind of has a couple people in it. But my main partner in crime is John Simonoff, the incomparable John Simonoff, best bass player ever. Oh my word, he's fantastic. And one thing that we've kind of figured out, we played in a lot of different groups together. We played in a jazz band and the Aroostook Voice and a bunch of kind of one-up. And a lot of times our style would flip depending on what we were doing. We were in a three-piece band for a while, and we would do a lot of extra stuff. In the Syndicate, we've kind of found that the best way we can express our art is it's usually by hanging back. John's bass lines, he can do incredible things. He can do two-handed tapping, and he can just fly, and he can be playing bass and melody at the same time. He can sound like he's three bass players with 17 fingers apiece. Wait, 17 on each hand. Yeah. Anyway, um, what we found though is that with the Syndicate, the both of us just kind of tend towards the groove. Like the bass drum becomes a lot more solid instead of going out. Blah, 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 blah. It's boom, check, boom, boom, check, boom, boom. You got that heartbeat kind of thing going on. And I lock in with John, and when we say that we're the heartbeat of the band, we don't mean to be egotistical. We mean a lot of times we are literally trying to replicate the feel of a heartbeat, because that gets to people. That forward momentum, that boom, boom, check, boom, boom, check, boom, boom. It's fun to express your art in that way. Just to be able to come into a gig and try to move people, and then as you're moving them, they're moving you too. You get that kind of and it changes how you play. You react to the audience, and they react to you. I think art is cathartic, but sometimes it's something that you do and then you release, and that's it. It's stagnant. It's on a wall. You never get to experience other people experiencing it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I love about drumming in the Syndicate, and I'm sure that you feel the same way as a performer, it's so great when people take your art and they add it to it, and it becomes this whole other thing. The feel in the room isn't just the band putting their into it, it's the crowd reacting to it, people
Mhm.
laughing and dancing and singing and coming up afterward, and they're just ecstatic that they were there. And that moment becomes something so much bigger than you because of everybody bringing their energy to it.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. It's in some ways it's kind of ephemeral because it's something that only exists in that moment, you know.
Yeah,
And even if
so
even
true.
if you have recording going on, recording doesn't capture all of that, you know. It
Yeah,
captures a semblance of the sound, but there's a lot more than sound going on there. We think of music as sound, but there's a lot more than sound going on. There's that social dynamic of the band interacting and playing on each other and living in that moment. It's you know, compared to writing is more of a solo sport. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Whereas playing music can be that. It can be that, you know, if you do like a lot of my music experiences building these tracks all by myself sometimes, and I get some joy out of that. But it's a different kind of joy than playing in the band because it's collaborative. It's like this team that's working together. It's like a if there could be a such sport as team surfing, where you're all riding the same board in the same wave together, um, it's like team surfing, right?
that's really apt. Yeah.
Because you're only going to hit that particular wave that one time, and
That's
even the same song in two different shows, it's like it's a different wave, right? And things happen in that particular version in that particular moment that never happen again, and it's like this joy of discovery in the moment. And I don't know, there are a lot of other collaborative creative things that people do, but boy, I have a hard time believing that any are quite as dynamic and spontaneous and exciting as playing music together. You know.
absolutely, yeah, or fulfilling, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 You share something with the band members and with the audience. You have a connection there that you know really it just keeps resonating. I mean, let's face it, we bump into each other and we bump into fans, uh, and there's a look, right? You see each other in
Yeah,
the store, and it's like, hey, there's one of them, right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And when people see you, the fans they see you in the store, they're like, hey, when they recognize you, you know, with me because I put on this crazy hat and stuff. A lot of times they don't recognize me without my stuff on, but when they do recognize you, it's like they've met one of their oldest friends ever, and they want to talk and share their day with you, and that's just cool, man. It's just
yeah, I
cool.
love that part too.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, yeah, and it's so in the moment. You know, with the other stuff, I ask you where you get your material from, right? Where does what you're doing on the drums in that moment, where is that coming from? How do you even I don't even know how to qualify that personally.
It's funny. There are certain things that I've listened to as a drummer that have been foundational. There was an album, a guy named Charlie Peacock released an album called Everything That's on My Mind. And the drummer for that album was some studio a drummer. I have no idea who he was in terms of his identity, but I listened to that album over and over and over because the stuff that he did was just fantastic. And
Hmm.
then there are all these little different snippets, fills that I've stolen from this drummer or Phil, Drew that stolen from this drummer. What's interesting is that I never know what I'm going to play that night though, because there are certain things that you have to play at certain times. I mean, if you try to play Sweet Caroline like you're a death metal drummer, people are going to shoot you. You can't really get away with that. But there are other fills that just it's the mood of the room, it's whatever you've been through to that day, it's how John is playing his bass, it's
Hmm.
just however you're kind of feeling. And that's one of the reasons that I know we were talking about how no two songs are the same. Even if you play the song 10 shows in a row, each time you play that song, it has kind of a different feel for you. I think it's very much influenced. Your art as a musician is influenced by where you are and what different factors impacted you kind of that day. That
Yeah.
impacts your performance. For me as a drummer, it's very much that. Sometimes I'm laid back and I'm just kind of hanging out on the 2 and the 4. And other times I'm driving forward because I've had some Mountain Dew or too much coffee. You never know how it's going to be. But that's the fun too of the art, taking what's in you, your joy de vivre and and putting it on up.
Yeah, yeah. When you started talking, that I started being able to put together my own head, kind of where I come from. It's like, the stuff that you put in there, that you listen to, that you practice, that you try, all of that winds up feeding and becoming a natural expression. That's the thing. You've got to really spend enough time with it. That's true at playing any musical instrument or any tool you're using for art. You got to spend some time with that thing, right?
Yeah,
If an artist spends a lot of time with their brush until it feels like it's just an extension of their hand, that's really when they can really start painting. I assume. I'm not a painter, but I would think it's that way. I know, like, writing, my particular tool, uh, it becomes when it starts feeling natural. The keyboard, I forget that I'm using a keyboard. That's when I'm really starting to write, right? But with
yeah,
musical instruments and even the fundamentals of music, I know here a few months ago, I was really trying to expand my horizon of how I can do particular improv and I would go naturally where when I'm wanting to create some improv or something, whether it's on an instrument or with my voice. And so I started studying some alternative scales. I say
yeah,
alternative. I mean, for somewhere in the world, they were probably people's normal scales because a lot of these came from other cultures, right? But instead of the typical major or minor scale or the jazz scale, I started experimenting with these other things like sound like they came from like India or something like that. And I think even George Harrison, he experimented with some of that. A lot of artists have, and I just spent some time just playing those, just like I was relearning my scales over again, getting those innately in my head. And it was probably a couple of months after that experiment that I'd be singing or doing something, creating a riff of some sort, and that came out, right? So there is something to be said about inputting. What you input eventually comes out when you have internalized it enough. But other than that, it's all environmental, man. It,
yeah.
it's environmental in the moment. I don't know. I can't. How many times? There's no way to count this, but it's just a common thing for the acoustics of the place
Oh
to
yeah,
affect how you play. Holy
absolutely.
cow!
Yeah.
We're not going to name names or point out specific places, but talk about an example of where the acoustics made it hard to do your to create your creation.
Yeah. Of course, there's one place in me sprang once because of rain. Had an outdoor concert turn into an indoor concert, and the closest indoor venue for us was a tiny. It was an abandoned church. Well, a church that had been turned into a historical society, and it was a small church, definitely not built for a really big band.
Mhm, mhm.
As you remember, we had to set up it around a giant pipe organ in the middle of the stage, which was kind of fun.
And they had
Um,
that tin plate stuff on the walls and ceiling.
yeah, oh, acoustically, holy cow. And we couldn't open the windows. They were literally nailed shut. So it was like 102 degrees in there, and everything was hard polished wood. So if you snap your fingers, you get it in stereo and it would almost take your head off. So then add trumpets, because like, why not? There was a Pat Kinsey who plays trombone. I remember he set up right behind me because we had no room. And he tapped me on the shoulder once and he's like, "Hey, if I hit fifth position, I'm going to take your head off. So duck, okay?" And I was like, "Ha ha ha." And he said, "No, I'm not kidding. I need you to duck." That kind of show. For me, the challenge with a song like "Hold On, I'm Coming," one of my favorite songs, it's so powerful.
Mhm.
You can't play that in a place like that, or else everyone will go deaf. So I remember when we hit that song, we had to tell everybody, we were telling the horns, "Okay, you got to step out. We need, if we have three trumpets, we need one and a half of you to play. Like one play normal, one play kind of quiet, one just shut up." We were trying to tamp it down. And as a drummer, I'm so used to hitting that boom and getting the bass drum going. And instead it was, it sounded like an elevator version of "Hold On, I'm Coming." That's the tricky part, when you have to take your art that's in you and this ennui and everything that's in you, and you got to go, let's kind of squeeze it to make it fit. But there's still joy in that when you figure out your parameters and you figure out how to use the room, um, you,
Yeah.
you can kind of feed off that. I think figure out what works and what doesn't, and then kind of roll with it and find joy in being able to do things that you wouldn't normally be able to do. Like if you've got a place that small, your dynamics are intense. You can hit the bass drum really super hard and have everybody go, "Holy Moses!" It's fun to work with confines like that, I think, sometimes. Well,
Yeah,
fun
yeah.
in short. I don't want to do it again.
And what's interesting is that particular show. I happen to be. I know what you're talking about. That was with Star City. We were really worried. We were worried going down there because the storm. There was an amazing storm that hit. I mean, it. I grew up in the South, as my accent, makes obvious, and that was a Southern style thunderstorm, man. That's what I remember growing up in Louisiana. I mean, it was buckets and lightning and thunder. Couldn't even see the road. And we were really nervous because we knew it was supposed to be an outdoor gig. And then they told us, well, come on, we're going to put you in this little church. And we're like, what are we getting into? We get there, and the location, the tiniest of it, and everything we've already mentioned, it kind of, made us that much more worried. And yet, by the time it was done, heat, sweating, half of us soaking wet, crazy building to be doing it in. And yet, the more we played, the more people showed up. And before it was over, it was one of my favorite shows ever to do.
Me too. It's one of the best shows we've ever done as a band. I've talked to Kevin Kinsey, actually, on trumpet, the Syndicate trumpet player, about this. It feels like we became who we are at that show. The people there turning out and us having to kind of overcome the challenges, but sharing it with those people who also had those challenges. They hadn't asked to be sitting in a small church with a big brass band, but they were fantastic. They loved us. Oakfield's our hometown crowd now, which is funny. None of us are from Oakfield. All of us feel that Oakfield is our hometown crowd. We love them. Anxious to get back there soon, I hope.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, very cool. Now, I asked you to share anything you want to share. Do you have anything else? I know we've been talking about drums, but I don't know how in the world you share that in this venue. You have any other parting piece that you would like to share with us of any sort? It doesn't matter if it's writing or music or whatever.
Just one. If I'd like to put out a shameless plug for my blog site. I don't know if this is going to pick up or not, but it's probably backwards.
harleymort.wixsite.com at my
there
site.
we go. That's the one. If you're super bored, this is the blog site that I've been playing around lately. Just to throw out the shout out. Everything's free. I just have fun writing on there. So if you're ever really bored and want to kill 15 minutes by reading something really random or bizarre, it's kind of nice that it's out there, and I really appreciate people checking it out. It's kind of fun to share stuff like that with it. That's about it. If you desperately want a copy of either of those books, I don't know why you would. They're nice to prop up tables. I guess they're kind of fun. They also really merchants at the corner of State Street and Academy Street. They have them for sale. Since they're closed right now, you can also buy
merchants on the corner. Merchants at the corner or on the corner. I wanted to say that because it just so happened that the computer froze right in the middle of saying that for a second. We've been kind of fighting that the whole time, but I want to make sure that name gets out there. Great little store. Lots of cool stuff for sale. Everything from gourmet candies to really good books. So
yes, they're good people.
Yeah. Well, man, I tell you what, I have had a great time, dude. I really enjoyed this, and I think as the first episode, I think this is a wonderful one because it kind of sets the tone for kind of how really relaxed and friendly and positive that I really wanted this to be. So I really appreciate you showing up and being able to do this, and like I said, I really enjoyed getting to see you, man. And I can't wait for the COVID-19 thing to be done so we can rock out again. So having said that, peace out, take care of yourself, and Lord willing, we will see you soon.
I hope so, buddy. It was really good to talk to you. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
All right, man. Bye-bye.
Bye.